It can flower for up to 3 weeks. And I just love it. Beautiful. They're found in every continent except Antarctica, so they're incredibly diverse. They're pretty, they're ugly, they're fragrant, they're stinky, they're large, they're small. I mean, there's so much diversity, and it's such an engaging, interesting group of plants. It captured my imagination. So I think it really came from my family. My parents were both very avid gardeners, but it's really my grandfather. They lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He loved gardening. He had a beautiful rose garden, a beautiful vegetable garden, but he also grew African violets. And if you've ever been to Minneapolis, it's very cold for about 6 months of the year. And he didn't have a greenhouse, so he created a greenhouse in his basement where he had lights set up and plastic, and then he had thousands of African violets all in bloom year-round. So that was his way to bring nature to those really cold months, and I always really admired that about him. I knew a lot about outdoor gardening. I knew about roses. My family had a large vegetable garden, cut flower gardens, and fruit gardens. But I didn't know anything about tropical plants. I grew up in Pennsylvania, not far from Longwood Gardens. And so it was a whole new exposure I was a conservatory intern, so I got to rotate through all the different conservatory areas. And so it really gave me the opportunity to learn something new. And I was so engaged with orchids because they're the largest plant family in the world. Orchid technology has rapidly changed where there's just a lot of tissue culture happening. These plants are being mass produced in places of the world like Taiwan, and so there's just incredible large greenhouse ranges miles and miles long. That's all they do is they monoculture these plants very quickly, and they can bring them to the market within a 2 to 4 year window, and so that brings the cost way down. And so the cost to produce the orchids is so much lower that that can be passed on the consumer at a much lower rate. So we've developed these wonderful partnerships with our museums where they will allow us to come and share space for 3 months, 4 months sometimes, where we will set up shop and we will host an exhibition in that borrowed space. This year we're working with the Hirshhorn, and our exhibition is called Moment, which is a capture in a moment in time. Because orchids, if you can look around, the flowers it looks like today will look different tomorrow. So we're trying to capture that moment in time as if you take a snapshot or a photograph.
Usually we go more of the scientific route, but because we're here in the Hirshhorn, which is an art museum, we are required to use minimal interpretation, which goes against everything we've done in the past. Sarah's great. She knows quite a bit about orchids. She's great with people, with interpretive information, particularly how to market our product for the public and make it appealing for display purposes, and it's just a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, it's been great. She's really helpful at letting you figure out things on your own, but also giving you good directions.
We have a big display case.
Horticulture can start from anywhere, just as more of an appreciation of nature. And I always say to students who are in college to do lots and lots of internships in a lot of different types of institutions, whether it's a for-profit institution or a nonprofit. We're more of a university campus setting garden. There's historic gardens like Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, which is completely different, or university garden like Sarah P. Duke Gardens that is very much focused on that campus setting, or Longwood Gardens that's a display garden which is completely different, or a conservation-based botanical garden where they're really focused on science and conservation like the Chicago Botanic Garden. So I mean that gives you so many different types of whatever hits your interest. I mean there's so many different ways to take horticulture. And so I always say, just get out there and do as many internships as you possibly can. Embed yourself into what's available and possible. He had a rule of thumb, and I'll show you once I finish, that if it wasn't met to his specifications, I had to redo it. I do a lot of lecturing to not only our Smithsonian staff, to our volunteers, to our visitors, do that on a regular basis. Also, I do a lot of writing, we do a lot of blogging, we do a lot of social media so we can get our collection out to the world. Flower buds or flower inflorescence? I think I would really love, on my bucket list, is going to Ecuador, somewhere in South America, Ecuador, Peru. There's so many wonderful orchids in those regions of the world. And because there's such pressure on the habitat, that a lot of those habitats are being lost, so I would love to see those areas before they might not be there any longer, or they're impacted by development.